It is good, so we are recording. I will.
Wonderful time of the year.
Guests.
Not that bad.
Okay, we are ready to go, Chair Kudo.
Yes, sir. It is 6:01 p.m. We'll call to order the meeting of the Community and Business Relations Committee. I see that we have all three members present. We're joined by Trustee Ursink as well. Bart, can you walk us through the agenda, please?
Sure, yeah. So we have the one item, which is consider recommendation of possible ordinance change to allow the keeping of chickens in the village of Shorewood. I have a brief presentation, which once again will summarize what we've heard. I won't spend too much time on those former parts, but we are here to review the draft ordinance, which I was directed to draft based off of Milwaukee and Wauwatosa's. That's not the right share. Sorry. No,
That's okay.
Is it? Where am I here now? We're gonna start this over again. Sorry, share. Okay. Admit more people. Okay, so once again, chickens are currently prohibited within Chapter 192.17b within the Village of Shorewood Code, amongst other animals which are not allowed to be kept. On February 6, 2023, the Village Board directed the Community and Business Relations Committee to take up this topic to see whether or not we wanted to change that code. Our understanding since discussion began was that this also happened back in 2009, but did not move forward. The initial discussion that we held this time around happened on September 18th, 2023, at which point additional public feedback was requested. So we performed a community survey from September 28th through October 18th, of which over 500 responses were received. We discussed this last at the November 6th meeting, at which time the committee directed staff to prepare a draft ordinance for consideration of recommendation to the village board. There are benefits and downsides to the keeping of backyard chickens that we have discussed and heard from the community. Of note, they have been permitted in various neighboring communities, including Milwaukee and Wauwatosa, which once again were used to draft the ordinance that is before us for discussion tonight. As I mentioned, we had over 500 responses to the survey. In total, the survey was pretty much split half and half between those that thought the village should not pursue this and those that thought we should, or that we should maybe, depending on the regulations within the ordinance. So that is where we're at. The most common concerns that were voiced within the community input and survey were related to noise, odor, rodents, predators, etc. They're listed here. Once again, we discussed them more at length last meeting. Neighboring experience, the city of Milwaukee and Wauwatosa. All staff that I talked to said that there were initial concerns similar to what was voiced in the community survey, but they were unfounded from their staff perspective. Milwaukee cannot recall having to revoke a permit. Wauwatosa said there's no problems with noise, and they credit their neighborhood consent requirements. They also said there were no rat issues. That was more common with dog waste. The North Shore Health Department oversees 4 communities that allow chickens currently, and only one complaint that they're aware of has been submitted. That was in River Hills, relating to a roaming chicken. So before us tonight, here is a draft ordinance, which once again I used Milwaukee and Wauwatosa's versions for. They're largely similar, only a few exceptions to discuss. Both of them allow up to 4 hens with no roosters, no slaughtering. Fresh food and water shall be provided. I did add specifically that when not being used, it needs to be kept in a closed storage container. We did hear that as part of the discussion with respect to keeping out rats and other animals from that food. The coop shall be kept sanitary and adequately sized with allowance of 16 square feet per hen with the enclosure and the coop combined. The coop itself shall be well constructed, moisture resistant, and either raised up or on a patio surface. The coop and enclosure shall be maintained to avoid becoming a health, odor, or other nuisance. The coop itself shall be no closer than 25 feet to a neighboring residential structure without permission. So the code does allow for it to be closer if permission is granted by that residential neighbor. And no coops are to be kept in the front yard. So those are the commonalities within the ordinances. The primary difference, which I mentioned in my memo, as well as whether or not Neighbor notice or consent should be added to our ordinance. It is consent required in Wauwatosa, so the neighbors of the adjacent properties and the diagonally abutting properties would need to provide consent in Wauwatosa prior to the issuance of a permit. In Milwaukee, it is the city will provide a notice of that application to the neighbors with 14 days to provide objection. If objections are heard, a hearing is scheduled with the commissioner. In our case, if we were to adopt that model, I've suggested in the draft that the Community Business Relations Committee be that committee, but it could be a different committee if that model is taken. And then lastly, the third option, just for consistency with respect to how we treat bees in the village, which once again I realize are different, but just for your reference, in Shorewood, we provide notice to neighbors that your application has been received, and staff is allowed to consider those objections based on an understanding of how that actually impacts the application at hand. If the applicant disagrees with staff determination, the Board of Appeals is always the option. So neighborhood notice or consent is the primary discussion point here that I'm looking for feedback on, as well as anything else that you might have to add. The additional regulation, Wauwatosa does not allow for the sale of eggs. Milwaukee does not have that in their code, but Wauwatosa specifically says that you should not have commercial sale of eggs. And then just for your reference, if advanced, there will also be various other elements to Chapter 192 that will be cleaned up. Anytime a chicken is referenced somewhere else, it'll have to be cleaned up and removed, et cetera. So what is before you tonight is just the contents of the chicken specific ordinance, but there will be other cleanup items that would need to be addressed. And then, so what we're here to do tonight is seek a recommendation to either adopt the ordinance with any suggested inclusions or edits and advance that to the village board. Under both of these options, I suppose the date of that next meeting would be nice to discuss. Obviously, we're heading to the holiday season and obligations and people's attention spans might not be there. So depending on when you'd like to do that, I'd like to, talk to the village manager about the next possible agenda. And then the second option would be to recommend the village board not pursue the change. If that is the desire of the committee, the trustee liaison could provide that to the village board within their staff report, at which point then the village board could discuss further action if desired, perhaps under future items of consideration or something of that matter procedurally. But the committee does have the option to not recommend it, but still advance it to the board for further discussion. So you could advance it for further discussion with a draft ordinance, or advance it for further discussion, or recommend not to advance it, but let the village board ultimately make that final call. And Trustee Kudo, if you have anything more specific on any other possible motions, I'm happy to hear it, but that's my general understanding of what the options would be for tonight. So I will stop sharing my screen unless someone else needs me to go back to something, but for the benefit of seeing who's in the audience, it's easier that way. So.
Okay. Thank you, Bart.
Just a clarification, backyard chickens. When I was reading through this stuff, it sounded like they could go in a side yard. Is that not true? It said not in the front yard. So
Correct. Yes. Thank you. Yes. They possibly could go in the side yard. That's much less likely based on the residential restriction requirement. But yeah, we're only currently prohibiting it from the front yard via ordinance. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, maybe do you have anything else, Trustee Sokoman?
I had a few things, but if you guys want to go through a
Yeah,
discussion.
just a clarifying question. I mean, could we move that the full board consider the recommendation without a recommendation from this committee?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
There's
I mean,
there's
so
many
just
options.
Maybe a nuance. Yeah. Okay. So I just see that as a nuance on the third that might be.
Yeah, I think that based on the conversations we've had in the past, I think there's a high probability that might be the case.
Yeah.
But I'd like to go through the proposed ordinance that Bart has put together for us, and then see what changes, if any, we think would be appropriate. And then I'm assuming if we wanted to, publish that to the full board, whether we agree on it or not, or whether we forward it as an agreed upon ordinance. But certainly I think having the discussion at this level, since we've invested so much time in it thus far, hearing community input, having discussion amongst ourselves, and then forwarding something onto the board for them to look at is probably where this is going to end up, I think, in my mind. So with that, does the committee have a preference on hearing from the community first, or would you like to ask questions first?
I'll jump in.
Okay.
From my reading of the proposal and the documents from the other communities, I guess the things that I'll just go through, things that concern me, that I don't see itemized here, but I think could be very tangible. And one is, as someone had explained to me, it could pit neighbors against neighbors. And as someone who knows neighbors who are not getting along for other reasons, I think nobody wants to be the one who says, well, my neighbors, I'm the only one that won't allow them to have chickens. And, that's sort of an intangible, right? That's a neighborhood relations issue. But I think it's real, and I think it's worth considering. Another thing that concerns me is that not everyone in Shorewood is going to be able to do this. I know the words vast majority are in here, but when I think about someone who wants to do it, and then because of the size of their lot, is discriminated against, maybe that's not the right word. But that's has meaning to me too, that not everybody in the village who wants to do this can do this because of the size restrictions. A third concern I have is that there have been contentions that this is a cost-saving issue. I would say that that's dubious at best, with the cost of feed, the cost of hatchlings, the cost of the structure. I did do a little research today. To put down a sick chicken is like a dog. It's about $400 to put down a bird that's not doing well. And I've got calls into the vets. The one vet I called in Shorewood they're classified as an exotic pet, and they don't do exotic pets. So, but I did call the place on Silver Spring. They'll put them down for $400 each. I'm concerned about the animal welfare. Maybe Bart and I are the only ones who grew up on a farm where there were actually chickens. We had them for meat and as egg production. And the thing that I don't see here is, the expectation that we're just going to put our faith in the people who take this on. This is basically a hobby. These are pets. The egg production idea, that's certainly a part of it, but it seems to me that most people would be doing this as a hobby and as pets, and I think this is valid, certainly, to show perhaps their children where their food comes from, right? But I guess I'm not seeing the animal welfare piece, and that makes me nervous. I don't see Parts grew up on a farm, but I mean, if you've got a concern about, is my neighbor taking care of his or her chickens, who do you call? And I think Bart did a little research for me today. It's Matic if you want them removed, if you want to see if they're being well kept, if they're in a humane situation. If you need it euthanized, the Humane Society apparently will do it, but we don't know the price, and that's not our problem. I'm just trying to make it transparent here. So correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct.
Okay. I did the one vet that did talk to me said it would be great if there was like a chicken husbandry course that you could say, well, you have to pass the course, right? But I'm not aware of anything like that. And I guess when you think about it, we did a lot of things on the farm to get our chickens ready for winter. We had a very specific thing had to be done. We had some heat lamps. We had to winterize the building. I'm thinking of 10-degree wind chill here and the water freezing and the chickens outside, how much you winterize it versus you want it to be ventilated in the summer. I don't think I question the animal husbandry and the animal welfare, especially in our climate. When I was reading through the list of requirements, I kept thinking that sounds like it's for a chicken coop in a lower, one of the lower states and not here. Finally, I have concerns about disease. I was talking to Becky Rowland today at the North Shore Health Department. And I think after the pandemic, we all have a little more awareness about diseases that jump species. And in Wisconsin, we're all certainly aware of chronic wasting disease. And Becky Rowland did say that there was a chicken farm in Wisconsin where they had to put to death thousands of chickens, and that was avian flu. And it's not jumping a species yet, but it's something that they're watching. And of course, these things happen more. We do know from science that these things happen more with animals in confinement. And so that's my final reason for my biggest concerns about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Arndorfer, do you want to say anything or do you want to go to community comments?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any major outstanding concerns based on, remains to be based on the experience of other communities and the work that we're doing, or that we have adequate regulation for the appropriate treatment of the chickens as well as neighbors. So I don't have any outstanding concerns and would want to be interested in hearing community feedback on it.
Okay. Anything further before we go? Okay, then we'll open it up for community comment, 617. Please raise your hand if you can, and we'll call on you in order. I see Alexa as number 1 in the queue.
And I believe, can you unmute yourself, Alexa? Is that?
And we need
Yep.
address and full name, correct?
Yep, correct.
Address and full name, please.
Okay, my name is Alexa Ann Safer, and I live at 4022 North Larkin Street. I was just going to say the part that we wasn't decided about the ordinance yet, how the decision should be made, whether it would. I think the second 2 options are really good options since the board has already kind of adopted that same tactic towards the beekeeping. So I kind of prefer that, but I do think it's really important to address that just to make sure that we don't cause problems between neighbors, because that's definitely not why people want chickens, definitely. But I just wanted to say that I really find this argument about the hens just kind of it's a double standard. We allow people to keep dogs without a test. We allow people to keep cats. We assume that they have the money to take care of them, to feed them and give them all the proper things that they need. We allow people to have children without a test. I mean, let's be honest about it. So I don't understand why hens are different. And I do believe that the very few of us in this village who would want to keep hens and are serious about it either already have experience with farm animals like I do, or they really are delving into this as they're they just are so interested. They want to learn everything they can and definitely have a love for animals. I mean, the people I've talked to are very concerned about being able to produce, their own food, which is something that I do with my 11 raised beds right now. And I would really love to be able to make my own eggs. I produce my own eggs, but I do think that maybe something could be added against selling eggs. I don't think we necessarily, of all the things I've heard other people complain about this idea, I think that might cause even more issues if people started selling eggs at, the side of their house or something. Not that would even be possible, because no one's going to have enough hens to make that many eggs, but I just see that as maybe being a possible issue. But I would just like to encourage the board to please, either way you do it, send this on, because for some of us, this is just, it's really important. I really, really care about this. I really would love to be able to do this. And I promise, I give my word to the village that I would do it responsibly. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. And if I mispronounced someone's name, I apologize in the front end. But Linda Layman. I'm getting older and the screen's far away. So you're next. You're muted. Bart, are you able to unmute her?
I am not. I think, yeah, Linda, I think there should be 3 dots next to your name. Perhaps if you click on that and within there. That's to mute it, though. I can't unmute.
For her.
Oh,
on
for her.
screen.
Yeah.
It's all the way in the top right.
So Linda, I'm going to come back to you. I'll have you go next after Barbara Kylie Miller, if you don't mind. Barbara?
Thanks. Linda, maybe if you see an icon for a little microphone on your screen, if you can click on that or tap on that. Just two things, thinking about all the issues we had to address when we put allowed patios, you know, in this front yard setback or side yard setback. Trustee Stokbrand had mentioned the side yards. And so I think we'd want to clarify that would not be on the street side, side yard. And whether it's in the backyard or on the side yard, I think you want to have some kind of screening from your neighboring property. So let's say you're on a, you know, your lot is large enough to get around the, you know, the 25 yards or 25 feet rather from your neighbor's property, that there should be some kind of screening or fencing for those of us who don't want to be in our backyard, you know, on a patio or gardening or whatever you might be doing and looking at your next door neighbor's chicken coop. I am concerned, as Trustee Stokbrand said, with, let's say you're the one person on the block, or, you know, having some kind of situation evolve where there's antagonism, you know, among the neighbors. So that would be one of my concerns, along with the other ones that you've already listed. But anyway, just the screening and not having it on the street side, side yard, I think are important. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda?
I'm unmuted now, right?
There we go.
Right.
Name and address, please.
Linda Larman, 1811 East Elmdale Court. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I also spoke at the September meeting and expressed then that I was opposed to backyard chickens in Sherwood, and I continue to have that view. I agree with the concerns enumerated by Trustee Stokbrand. And what I'd like to focus on in a couple of minutes is the chicken manure issue. I think this has been given short shrift, and respectfully ask that you give it long shrift, if there's such a term. From the research I have done, a hen produces on average 15 gallons of manure a year. So if someone has 4 chickens, we're talking about 60 gallons of manure a year. And also from what I understand from research, and everything I've looked at is consistent, mainly from university websites, that if the manure is put directly on the soil, on plants, it burns the plants, and it also contaminates the soil and the groundwater. And I think we need to be very conscious of soil, groundwater, and human and other animal health with the consideration of this proposal. Chickens, their manure is full of potential salmonella, E. coli, and other pathogens. And so from what I've read, come to understand, the manure, both to be safe for plant life and in particular produce, and also safe for human and other animal health, must be aged and or composted. And in our climate, it would take at least 6 months to get it properly composted. And when it's stored and or composted, those setups, for lack of a better word, need to be isolated from children, animals, and rain and snow. I did not see this in the Milwaukee or Wauwatosa ordinances, but skimming, it would almost be impossible to do a thorough examination of this. But looking at some other Wisconsin ordinances, including cities as big as Madison and as small as Hudson, Wisconsin, they include in their ordinances specific rules on what may and must be done with chicken manure. 3 other little nits I would like to raise about the draft ordinance. Maybe they're slightly more than nits. In paragraph A, permit and inspection. I was happy to see the inspection stuff, but I think there was, to me, there was some ambiguity there. It says, the last sentence says, upon the issuance of the permit and the installation of the chicken coop, the applicant shall submit an inspection to demonstrate that the requirements are met. Shouldn't that be as a condition of a permit and prior to use of the chicken coop, something like that? I wondered about the 25-foot rule, because paragraph G something or other, one of those subparagraphs under G talks about allowing chickens in the coop and any adjoining yard. The yard must be fenced, of course. But what occurred to me there is, if the coop is 25 feet from my residence, but the yard is not, is that acceptable? In my opinion, it should not be. And then this sort of goes back to my overall concern about health. In paragraph H1, it talks about chickens shall be kept and handled, blah, 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 spread of communicable diseases among birds or to humans. What about other animals? Many people would have dogs and cats and they're in the same yard as chickens. And even squirrels and rabbits should be protected from disease. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey Wickland.
Hi there. I'm speaking on behalf of my husband, Dan Wickland. He would like me to go on record saying I'm not opposed to chickens. I'm actually just opposed to him having more hobbies. We have successfully taken care of chickens in the past when we lived in Milwaukee, and we really enjoyed them. Our kids really enjoyed them. So we are in favor of chickens. Thank you.
That's not what I thought you were going to say. Okay. Barbara, we're running short on time and we have some comments in the room. Is there something new you would like us to hear?
Yeah, I just realized I forgot to give my address before. It's 4051 North Downer Avenue.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience that would like to be heard?
Thank you. Thank you, trustees, for hearing me tonight. My name is Sandy Pendleton. I live at 3529 North Frederick Avenue. Thank you also to Mr. Griepentrag for his thoughtful drafting job and with the options there. The last time this came before the village, my wife and I came and spoke in favor of allowing chickens in Shorewood. We have been longtime proponents of chicken in Shorewood, having both grown up in the country and been around chickens, and realized that they're really a wonderful thing. Reasonable minds, of course, can differ on this, but I found the most persuasive thing in the materials distributed to be the fact that this seems like the keeping of chickens in other communities has just worked out fine. No significant problems. Communities across Wisconsin has done this. I don't see any reason why we in Shorewood are somehow more incompetent or more stupid than people in other communities that we can't make this work here. As to some of the other concerns raised, I submitted some written comments to Mr. Griepentrag and to other members of the committee, so I won't go through each of those. But I do think this concern about we don't want to pit neighbor against neighbor is a very valid consideration. But I also think the Wauwatosa option is not a good option and would not work well in Shorewood. I think if a person is opposed to their neighbor having chickens, that person should be willing to make their argument to either staff or the Board of Appeals that they shouldn't just be able to ignore a request from their neighbor on this. And that's what the Wauwatosa option would allow. So I think the best option of the three is the Milwaukee option. I encourage you to adopt that option and make a recommendation to the full board in favor of allowing the residents in Shorewood who want to do this and who will do it responsibly, because if not, they can get fined, they can get their permit pulled, allow them to do it. In terms of disease that chickens can carry, yes, they can. No doubt about that. People should be aware of that. But cats can spread disease too, and we allow cats in Shorewood. Pregnant women can receive a very serious disease from cats. We allow cats. Dogs, we allow dogs. We allow turtles. Lots of people get salmonella every year in the U.S. from turtles. We allow turtles in Shorewood. We allow dogs, even though they produce a great deal of fecal material. It's just something that needs to be managed in an intelligent way, and we can regulate that. In terms of the other issue here, the bottom line is chickens have worked in other areas. Chickens are fascinating to watch, just like watching any other bird. They add a real note to someone's backyard. I urge you to pass this along to the village board so they can consider it and hopefully pass it. Thank you for consideration of my comments.
Thank you. Of course, yeah. Please feel free.
Reese Block Pendleton.
You basically. have to eat the
Okay,
microphone.
how's that?
That's much better.
Treese Block Pendleton. I hear a lot of discussion about pitting neighbor against neighbor. We've raised chickens in Shorewood. We raised them to a certain size and then they went and lived on the farm. What I found with chickens in Shorewood was it brought our neighborhood together. We had lots of people, lots of kids coming and visiting our house, visiting our chickens. It was a real draw. It wasn't something that pitted neighbor against neighbor. It was something that brought our neighborhood, our block, our community together. Not something that pulled us, pushed us apart.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from community members? There are no more in the room, but anybody else online? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment at 6:33. And we will enter discussion. Trustee Ursink, anything you want to say since you're here? Okay. Trustees Arndorf or Stokebrand?
I just had a question as I was reading this today. Because we have so many duplexes in terms of neighbor notification or consent required, we talk about adjoining properties, but wouldn't you also have to ask for everyone in the building? Like if you had an upper lower where the owner owns one and you have got a renter, what do you think about that?
So currently neighbor notice within the village code is defined as property owner. And so we don't actually require or notice tenants. This question came up at last week's plan commission as well. So if it's a duplex, we would notify the duplex owner, and it would be up to them to notify their tenants and discuss whether or not they have a problem with it. But we don't.
Or it could be vice versa, right? It could be the renter who doesn't want it. Either way, if you could have a renter who wants to have chickens and the owner who doesn't want you to have one. But then because you're the property owner, you could say no, right? You could just say, well, it's my property.
Yeah, the
Right
applicant.
into the
So
list.
unless you're a property owner here,
The applicant does need to get permission from the property owner if they're renting it from them. With respect to consent or notice, that currently only goes to the owner, who is then asked or expected to talk with their tenants about it. So yes, if you're a renter and you want to have chickens, you need to get permission from your property owner at the time of application. With respect to the options at hand, what is drafted here would be towards the property owner, who would then need to provide that approval based on them discussing it with their tenants if their tenants have issues with it. Or whatever the committee, would prefer to go on that. But that as drafted, it's for the property owner.
so if the tenant opposed the chickens, you're the tenant and everybody else, it would happen.
Of the neighboring property, correct. And that would be on the
Or no, on
property owner.
that property.
On that property, the property owner needs to give permission for chickens to be on that property. So if they're the applicant, it's a no-brainer because they're the applicant and they're applying for it. If you're a renter and you want to have chickens on a rental property, a duplex, for example, you need to get permission to apply from the property owner. So that is written in here.
Are you asking if, let's say there's a property, there are two tenants in a duplex. property owner says, yes, one of the tenants gets chickens, the other tenant doesn't want chickens, they're just stuck with chickens. Is that what your question is?
Essentially, then by the property owner allowing it, the property owner has made their decision to say,
For their
I'm
property.
fine with it, and I don't necessarily agree with the other tenant who doesn't want them there.
Any further questions? Otherwise, I'll go down my very short laundry list. Anything else? Good? Good. Arthur, last kick at the can? Good? Okay. So I guess I'm a little bit different when looking at the notification requirements. My preference, frankly, would be for folks to have to get an okay from there. I recognize that there are some folks that have concerns about one neighbor being able to stop another neighbor from having chickens in their backyard. What I would say is I get it, but I still want neighbors to have to say yes. Shorewood is the yards are so small, the neighbors are so close together. Wauwatosa, the acreage is a little bit larger. I mean, Shorewood's just incredibly dense. So I think that we have a unique situation here. And if chickens do truly pull people together and are sort of a community thing, then getting an okay from a neighbor really shouldn't be that hard. I don't think it should be the responsibility of the neighbor to have to go in, file a complaint or file a grievance with the village, and then have to go to a village meeting and take time out of their day to combat or to go against chickens that they don't want. So that would be one thing. I do have, Trustee Lynn, you feel free to join us if you'd like to participate in the chicken talk. Okay. I do have questions about chicken waste. So do we know, is that something that we will pick up? Do we pick it up same as dog waste?
Correct. It can be disposed of as waste or as compost. The
Okay.
DPW did confirm that.
Okay. Thank you for checking for DPW.
Yep.
Under paragraph G.4, chickens will be provided with a sanitary and adequately sized chicken coop. What are the requirements? Who determines the requirements on? I mean, I know that we saw in the slideshow sort of some parameters, but who and how do we determine what an appropriate coop is? Because again, there are differences between chicken coops in the south, chicken coops up north. How do we figure that out?
I agree with you. I actually asked the building inspectors who would be enforcing this or administering it if they wanted to have size requirements, and they did not because they thought conditions could be different. They thought that it's one of those things where if you see that it's too small, they're comfortable saying it. And once again, the Board of Appeals could be utilized to disagree with staff. That's a common process, unfortunately. They were comfortable with adequately sized. That's what Milwaukee and Wauwatosa both have, and so I didn't vary from that.
My only concern there is that that's really vague. And I'm now thinking of the folks who would want to have chickens, but there's not a lot of specificity with the amount of space that they need for their chickens, as outlined by the village. And so, I just would worry that they would come to us, get the permit, build it, and then realize it's not big enough, right? Or whatever. That's one of the concerns that I have.
It does say 16 square feet per chicken.
I think
that's in totality with the enclosure. So
Right.
Interior and exterior together. So
Right.
it's not only the range, but also the coop.
Right. And I
So-
guess the other thing, I felt the same way about fencing. Fencing can take so many different forms. Or what is it called?
I mean, for me, it's the owner of the chicken's responsibility to keep their chickens in their yard, just like it would be for a dog owner. And they would have to handle that appropriately. 16 square feet, I'm fine with that. No chicken coop should be kept in the front yard. I think that's a no-brainer. I actually would like to include side yards as well. I mean, my house, if I were a tall person, which I'm not, but if I were tall, I could touch both houses between myself and my neighbor. That's just a really close space. And I absolutely agree that chicken eggs should not allow those to be sold in the village. It just opens up a whole can of worms that, I mean, there are plenty of people around here you can give chicken eggs to, little neighbor. And H1, chickens shall be kept and handled in a sanitary manner. So can you walk us, so that it falls under the health department? Can you walk us through what that process looks like? Do you know what that process looks like?
I don't. I'm not a health inspector, so I would defer that to Director Rowland, but she has reviewed this and didn't provide any concerns. I presume it would be a complaint-based process where, you know, someone says that so-and-so is not keeping them in that manner, and the health department would be asked to review that. I know they do that with dog waste, for example, when someone reports their neighbor of having excess dog waste. So that really would be an answer for them. But I presume based on, you know, their review that they were comfortable making that call.
Okay. That's what I have for notes. Where does the committee fall? Where do the other committee members fall on notification? What are either of your thoughts?
I would prefer option 3, consistent with bees. I mean, if someone can raise bees without having to notify their neighbors or have that process be adjudicated.
They do notify.
Well,
the
I mean,
neighbor.
yes,
Correct. Yep.
Correct. Sorry.
Yep.
Meaning they don't need their neighbor's approval. And
Just a notification
Yeah,
requirement.
neighbors should be notified. I don't think neighbors should be able to determine whether they can own chickens in their backyard or not.
Okay.
You know, same principle as dogs as well. Dogs are loud,
Trustee
can be
Coe-
loud.
Okay. Anything else? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I would favor the neighborhood.
Okay. That's kind of where, I mean, that's where I am. Do we have, I know I saw President McKay walking. Okay.
You did.
Okay. I'm not totally losing my mind. Is there anything you'd like to say?
I
Trustee Lynn? You have to, sir, please move to the mic and name and address.
So, Jerry Lynn, 4522 North Marlborough Avenue. You know, I love the process that this is going through. I think it's going really well. I think we're doing all the right things to check off all the boxes, take a detailed look at what the policy will be like. I just really think we're doing all the right things in this process. And I think that is kind of foreshadowing how the people in this community would approach owning chickens as well. You know, I think part of the thing with chickens, part of the concern is that we all share is, well, what if they're a bad chicken owner? What if they're not clean? What if they're not telling their neighbors? What if they're not doing all the right things? What if the coop is too small? And I think, you know, looking at other communities that have done this, look at who our neighbors are. They're some of the best people in the community. You know, they're excellent people who care about the community, who care about their neighbors. You know, we're so lucky to live in this community where so many people do such a good job with so many different things. You know, I think a good example is you know, one of them is beekeeping. People have done a great job with that. You know, and people care, and the people who are volunteering to do this, to own chickens, are the people who want to put in the expense. They want to take the time to do it. They want to go through all these steps. They want to care for the chickens. They love chickens. And so I think, you know, I have a lot of faith in our community to be able to kind of follow these rules, even if some of them are slightly more vague, that are harder to kind of pin down. You know, so for me, you know, I'm willing to put my faith in people. And I think with regards to notification, I think the B route is fine. I think when you require approval, you're also giving neighbors a tremendous amount of power. And what happens if one neighbor just doesn't like the other neighbor unjustly, you know, and now they want to wield this over that neighbor's head or something like that? You know, what if one of my neighbors is a constituent who didn't, you know, vote for me and doesn't like me and I want to own chickens? Well, then they're going to hold it over my head, you know, which is fine. They can do that at any time. But I think we got to be cautious, and I think we do have to be a little bit trusting of our neighbors that they're going to make the right choices and do the right thing. That's all for now.
Thank you. President McKay, not to put you on the spot, but Anything you want to say on chickens? Yeah, I'm sorry. You have to come up. Yep, the whole thing.
My name is Ann McCullough McCaig, and I live at 1805 East Elmdale Court, number 4. And I think you're all doing a really great job, and I appreciate so much input and discussion. I would respectfully ask for the opportunity to vote for or to consider it at the village board level. So I'm hoping for a recommendation or no recommendation, but out of committee.
Okay, thank you. So I'm a little torn here. I mean, I think I remain opposed. Based on, I'm going to assume that Trustee Stokebrand remains opposed, and that Trustee Arndorf favor.
Correct.
Okay. So what I think makes the most amount of sense, frankly, is seeing as though even if this failed in committee, it could get pulled before the board anyways. So in order to continue this process moving ahead and not have to have yet another meeting on this, I think what I'd like to do is take a vote to not necessarily approve or not approve this as written out of committee, the ordinance, but to send it to the board and to have the board determine what actions we want to take as a whole. Any thoughts? Terrible idea? Best idea I've ever had? Let me know.
I'd prefer to take a vote at the committee level.
Okay.
I mean, 6-1, I would like to move. I would like to pass it along without an endorsement from this.
Okay. That's where I am. I plan on, I would vote against this at committee level. Unless there are many amendments to the proposed ordinance, I will probably vote against it at the board level. But I feel like we've done our due diligence. We've had as many conversations as we possibly could have had at the committee level. Bart has put a tremendous amount of work into this. We've had conversations with other communities, with the health center. I mean, at this point, I am pretty comfortable sending it to the board with no recommendation and having the board determine what they want to do with it when they get it. So I would be happy to entertain any motion, but they will require a second.
I move that we not forward the possibility of chickens in Shorewood forward.
Is there a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails. Is there another motion? It's okay.
And you may wish to make your own based on what I heard
yeah,
you and Eric just say before. So I don't know if my recommendation is aligned with that or not.
I move that the full village board consider this ordinance change at a future meeting without an endorsement from the committee.
I will second that motion. Any discussion from the committee members?
No, I just would like to say again that, I outlined the 5 things. The piece that I'm missing here is the animal welfare. That's one of the biggest pieces to me. And if I saw, a veterinary piece in here somewhere, I guess if someone goes into their coop and sees a chicken that's down or it's gone lame, what do? I'm still waiting to see if we can get, vets in Shorewood that see them. That's my concern. And the putting them down because we don't allow slaughter. So, and I just, an animal suffering is not a good thing, right? So, what do when you see the chicken it doesn't move, it's sick, or it's lame? Then what do you do?
Fair, noted.
Yeah, I would just like to add that. I mean, I think ultimately we have to trust that the people who would want to take on this endeavor would do so with, full care and, commitment to doing it the right way, given the amount of expense involved. I'm reasonably sure that they would. I mean, we can talk about, whether this would pit neighbors against neighbors. I mean, you can say that about just about anything. I mentioned a loud dog earlier, for instance. People make choices and they have to kind of move on with how they want to handle things. We can't regulate that. I don't believe that this is something that would, trigger, well, more discord in Shorewood, but, stay tuned, I guess. And not everyone can do this. I mean, that is true, but I mean, you can say that about a lot of things too. I mean, some people can't have a fire pit in their yard, for instance. They don't have enough room, or, can't have a water feature or a pond in their backyard. I'm just listing some things I'd like, by the way. But, so I did appreciate the conversation about manure, something I never thought I'd say, but I do want to make sure that we're approaching that with, a great deal of thoughtfulness and rigor if we proceed with this. And so again, I would be supportive of the full board taking this on.
Trustee Stokebrand.
There's one more thing. I did check with Bart, and a dead chicken can go in the garbage bin in Shorewood.
Something else I didn't know that I would learn
It's
today.
been a fun day.
Yeah, it's just okay. Again, I'm not in love with the idea. I am in favor of sending it to the full board for consideration. What I would like to see, however, is the design of the coop more appropriately addressed, I think, than just we'll have a good enough coop. I mean, there are serious concerns about the welfare of the animal. At least I have some serious concerns about the welfare of the animal. Certainly, as far as veterinary care or something along those lines, that's not something we can regulate. I don't think we should be able to regulate. But they should be kept in a safe, secure, comfortable environment while their owners have them. And that's something that we would require from any animal in the village, and I don't think chickens should be an exception. So, with that, I will vote on the motion that was presented by Trustee Arndorfer, seconded by Trustee Kudo, to forward this amendment or to this ordinance to the village board with no recommendation from this committee. All in favor of forwarding, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Trustees Arndorfer and Kudo voting aye. Trustee Stokebrand voting nay. I believe that was our only business for this evening. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
With a motion to adjourn and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We will stand adjourned at 6:54. Thank you, Bart.
Thank you all very much. I got to figure out how to pause this.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Chicken can